Mr. Drummer for inviting me out. I really appreciate him believing, having the faith in me that I had something to offer to you guys. Miss Contrell, who just walked out, for believing in him enough to agree to let me come out. I appreciate you guys. And I also want to thank my father for coming out to support me today. Pastor Clyde Foreman Sr. Appreciate you. Some of you might know my father, right? How many of you guys know my father? Yeah, okay, cool. That's cool. So I appreciate him, man. So if you guys looking for a church, y'all just need to go and see him down in Midville, End Time Faith Ministries. He's the pastor. I got to put that plug in there for him, right? I got to do that. All right, so I only have like maybe 45 minutes to an hour today, so I don't want to waste too much time with the nice pleasantries. I want to get right into it. The reason I came here today is something I do quite a bit when I speak to young people in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta, so I work with young people, speak to young people quite a bit. And my main message to them is I'm trying to reconstruct their perception of how they see themselves and how they see the world and their place in the world, so to speak. Because in my opinion, it's not until you really realize who you are and where you're from, what your history is about, until you can really achieve and understand what's required of you as young men coming up in this society today. So that's really what I want to talk to you guys about and spend some time discussing with you today. So that's my presentation, Reconstructing Perception. That's me, Travis Foreman. So I like to start every time I speak to young people with some type of analogy or a quote, something to get you thinking about the bigger picture of what we're going to talk about. And let me tell you something else. Like, I'm kind of interactive. So if I call on you to say something or answer a question, don't be scared. It's only a few of us in here. So, like, just be willing to discuss with me. I'm a former teacher, so I like to have a discussion more than me talking at you. I'd rather discuss with you. That's how I approach it. So the analogy I want to present you with this morning before I get into my speech is something I came across reading a book before of African proverbs. It's called the chain elephant analogy, right? So first of all, how many of you guys have ever seen an elephant? Ever seen an elephant? Maybe not in person, maybe not at the zoo or the circus, but maybe like in a book or something. We've all seen, have we all? Let me ask it this way. Who have not seen an elephant? Anyone has never ever seen an elephant? You never seen an elephant? Okay, one. Hey, that's cool. I mean, this is Swainsboro, Georgia. There's no zoos around here. So that's why I ask before I make an assumption that we all have, right? So those of you who have seen an elephant, can we agree that the elephant may be the biggest creature, the biggest mammal on earth? Would you agree with me on that? Who agrees with that? Raise your hand if you agree. The elephant is probably the biggest animal on earth. All right? You think it's something bigger? What's bigger? Hey, see, look, I'm in law school, right? So you gotta listen closely to what I said. I specifically said on earth though, right? Yeah, see, my man was listening. Not on the water. I'm specifically talking about walking around on earth. But you're right in that sense. The whale it may rival the elephant. That's true. So, along with the elephant being the biggest mammal on earth, can we also agree that it may be the strongest animal on earth? Who agrees with that? Elephant is probably the strongest elephant on earth. Yeah, true. I agree with that. The strongest animal. Okay, cool. So, basically now that we all agree with that reality, the elephant is probably the biggest mammal on earth, it's probably the strongest mammal on earth. My question to you is, how is it that in certain cultures, even in the circus, they are able to put an elephant in chains? How is that possible? How is it possible to keep an elephant in chains? If it's the strongest elephant on earth, it's probably very easy for that elephant to break free of a chain. If we took an elephant right now and chained it outside to a pole or a tree, it probably could either break that chain or break whatever it was chained to, right? So how is it possible for this to happen? They calm them down? How they calm them down? Tranquilize them? Who else? Tranquilize them to calm them down? What you think? Huh? They give them some type of drink to numb them up? Okay. What else? They break their spirits. That's interesting that you says that. I like that answer. They break their spirit. How do they break their spirit, though? How do they train them? What if I told you this, that in order to get this full-grown elephant in the chain and to stay in the chain and not break that chain, it starts right here when that elephant was a baby. right? So they take a baby elephant, they chain him to something, and initially that elephant is going to try to break free. You see right now, this elephant is fighting. He wants to get free. He don't want to be chained, right? But at that age and at that size, he can't break free. He can't break free. So after a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks of trying to break free, he'll stop fighting. And eventually, they can take this chain off of his foot, and guess what's going to happen? What do you think will happen if they take the chain off that elephant's foot? He's going to stay right there. He's not going to go any further than the chain previously allowed him to go. He'll go no further. He'll stay right there. But this is when it really gets interesting to me, right? When that elephant gets older and has a baby, guess what that baby elephant's going to do? He's going to stay right there by his mom. He'll go no further. Because this perception is that the world is only this big. Because this is only as far as mama has gone, this little radius. So this is only as far as I can go. See, when I read this, it made me think about coming here today. This previously was not in my presentation, but I added it because it's a great analogy. It's a great parallel to what I want to talk to you about today. How the chains we don't even see on our ankles, we're not chained physically, but we're chained mentally. And it keeps us right where we are, and we never wander out any further than what we've seen and grown accustomed to. So whether that be Swainsboro, whether that be Twin City, me from Millen, I experienced the same thing growing up in Millen. Who knows where Millen, Georgia is? Yeah, okay, so that's smaller than Swainsboro, right? So I want you to keep this in mind as we talk today about what it is I want to talk to you about. All right, so let's take an intermission so I can tell you a little bit about me. I don't really like to talk about myself, man. It's hard to get me to talk about myself because I'd rather just spend time talking to you about some important things. But I can share a little bit with you because I'm pretty sure some of you sitting out here right now are feeling the exact same way I was feeling at the time I was sitting in one of these things at your age. How old are you guys? What grades y'all in? All grades? 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th? Okay. Y'all guys enjoying school? Y'all like school? It's all right? It's straight? Okay. All right. Well, I asked you that question, man, because I grew up in Millen, Georgia, right? Very small town. Y'all all know where it is. And for me, about this age, I became disillusioned with school. I didn't really like school because I didn't see, growing up where I grew up, there wasn't a lot of positive people that looked like me. You know what I mean? There weren't a lot of people who were doing anything that I look forward to doing in my life. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. Mr. Drummond just told you, my dream is to be a lawyer since I was a little tot. My father can attest to that. He's sitting right over there, right? But I didn't see any black lawyers growing up where I grew up, right? So eventually it became kind of depressing to me, and I didn't think it was possible. I didn't see a way that I would ever achieve that goal that I had set for myself. So instead of focusing and making it happen, I became disillusioned. My perception changed. So instead of focusing on that goal, I began focusing on the cool kids, right? I decided, okay, if I can't be a lawyer, I'll be one of the cool kids. You know what I mean? I do what the cool kids do. Start making bad decisions, expelled from school, you know, some of the same things you probably have experienced yourself, getting suspended from school, giving my daddy a gray hair right now, right? Just making bad decisions. And the sad part about it is it didn't stop in high school, I won't lie. Because even though I went to college right after high school, I didn't really go to college because I wanted to go to college. I went to college for a couple of reasons, really 2 reasons. One, because my mom and dad expected me to go. You know, they told me, you're going to college. They didn't have a college education at the time, so they told me, you're going to college. So I didn't want to disappoint them. So I went to college for that reason. And the second reason I went to college was to prove all the teachers and the counselors who told me I wouldn't go to college, I just wanted to prove them wrong. So I went there with those 2 goals in mind, but that was it didn't really make me enjoy the process. I was doing it for the act of doing it, if you know what I mean. So I wasn't really into studying or none of that stuff. I still was trying to be one of the cool kids. Running back to Millen, I went right over here to Georgia Southern University, Statesboro. So I would go back to Millen as often as I could to see some of my old friends and hang out and party and do all the stuff we used to do, right? I wasn't really focused on school. But it was during my time at Georgia Southern University, I ran into a professor there. His name was Dr. Jallo. I'll never forget him. He taught me African history, right? And for whatever reason, he saw something in me. And he would call me to the side and invite me into his office, and he started putting certain books in my hand for me to read. to explain to me that we're bigger than this. The way you're approaching this, the way you are viewing life, we are bigger than this. You know what I'm saying? Like, better is expected of you. That there's greatness in your history. I had never heard that before. I had never heard there was greatness in my history, right? Because as far as I had known up until that point, I was the descendants of people who you probably heard the same thing. Who are we the descendants of? Who knows what that means when I ask you, who are your descendants? Who are your ancestors? Who do we come from, huh? Say it again. Right? It's already breeded in you already, right? That's what you learned in school. Your ancestors were slaves. Now, I'm not knocking that because that's part of your history, a small part of your history. But my goal here today is to kind of challenge that perception and broaden that perception. I want to broaden that perception for you because we're so much more than that. It's so much bigger than just being the ancestors of slaves, right? Have you ever heard that before? Some of you say yes, some of you say no. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I told you I was going to keep my part about me brief. I don't like to talk about myself. So that's what I want to talk to you right about today. How is your perception of who you are influenced? What influences how you see yourself in the world, your place in the world? What influences that, right? So I already skipped ahead a little bit. I got ahead of my PowerPoint. We already talked about who you've been told your ancestors are, and you all told me slaves. So this is the statement you usually hear when it comes to who you are. You are the descendants of slaves. I heard it all through school. You've heard it. Some of you already agree. You've heard it, but I want you to think about what that means. Think about what that statement means for your life. You are the descendants of slaves. This is the definition of a slave, right, from the American Heritage Dictionary. One who was bound in servitude as the property of a person or a household. One who is abjectly subservient to a specific person. And that word abjectly subservient, that simply means someone who without question, without asking, would do whatever someone else tells them to do, right? So that's who you are. That's what you've been told. You are someone who's willing to do whatever you're told to do. You won't question it. You won't ask if it's not good for you, you won't question it because that's who your descendants were. They were slaves, someone who was willing to do whatever someone has asked them to do without ever questioning it. You see where I'm going with this? So now I want you to think about what that really means, though. What that statement really means, what images, because when you hear that, it conjures up a certain image in your mind. You see something subliminally in the back of your mind that makes you think of something specific, a specific image. And that's what I want to challenge, the image of who you think you are. So when I hear the word, you are the descendants of slaves, I automatically think of our ancestors who were brought here on slave ships, packed in, couldn't move, side by side, right? So then I start to think about the fact that once we got here, we were sold as chattel property. We were sold as property, just like you go and buy sneakers at the store. They sold us just like that, right? So then I think about the fact, to get us over here, they chained us up, like animals, treated us like animals, had us chained, and we couldn't do what we wanted to do when we wanted to do it. Picked cotton, we worked, did that part of it, got whipped when we didn't agree. The ones who were not abjectly subservient, that's what happened to them, right? They got whipped. So then you got to think about, it doesn't even stop there. Because once slavery was over, right, and we became free, right, so to speak, it didn't stop, right? Because what happened after slavery? Black people were still treated badly in the South, across the country, Jim Crow laws. Black people couldn't do certain things, couldn't go certain places. So you got to think about the enduring legacy of slavery. Once that image comes to your mind, so what does that look like? The enduring legacy. Again, sharecroppers, people picking cotton just so they can survive. Lynchings, that's what happened to black men in the South. Lynchings, black women too, as you can see in the top right corner, it don't matter. That's what happened. That right there happened right in Atlanta, Georgia. The one on the bottom, that was right in Atlanta, Georgia, right? That's what happened to black people in the South. And then it kept going to the 60s, and you got Emmett Till, right? And that's what happened to him. And you got to put a real picture so you can know what that is on the right-hand side. So that's what happened to us as descendants of slaves, right? How many of you ever seen these type of images? Have you ever seen these images? Every time I do this, it surprises me that you've never seen this stuff before because it's not even taught to you in school anymore, right? You don't even hear any of this anymore. So then, in my opinion, it doesn't stop here either, because in my opinion, the legacy of slavery continues today. So what does that look like today? What does slavery look like today? What would you think? What do you think? What does slavery look like today? Living in the projects, okay. Who else? What does slavery look like today? What do you think, my man? What does slavery look like today? Yeah. Okay. You had one? Change your mind? All right. Somebody had one over here? All right, I ain't gonna pressure you. Oh, you got one? What you think, my man? The one in the middle? What about it? What is that? Oh, okay, yeah, man, we can go back to that. This is Emmett Till, man. This right here? This is Emmett Till's body when they found him once he was murdered. This is him, and this is how they found him. You understand what I'm saying? The enduring legacy of slavery. That's what we're talking about. Huh? Exactly. During that time period, that's when that happened. Okay, so what does it look like today? We're talking about the continuing legacy. Oh, my bad. I forgot about y'all, this side of the room. What does it look like today? My man said jail. That's what it looks like today, right? That's prison today. That's slavery today, in my opinion. Jail. And you see the numbers, how black men are disproportionately filling up the jails. 13% of the population, but 60% of the jail population. There's a problem with that, right? When they get that crowded, man, you got to do what you got to do, right? They crowded. So then you see prison laborers, and I'm going to get back to that in a second. Prison laborers, that's what you see right there, right? Private prisoners who invest in stocks, betting on the fact that you're going to go to prison because they get rich off of that. They make money off of people going to prison. That's how they get paid, right? So look, the 13th Amendment, why is this important to me seeing prisoners doing work? Because the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, it ended slavery in every capacity unless you were as punishment for a crime. So if you commit a crime and go to jail, guess what? You're right back in slavery. So it's not just some type of thing I'm using to scare you. It's what it is. That's the 13th Amendment right there on the bottom of that screen. If you commit a crime, you go to jail, you are a slave. So at that point, I can use you to do free labor, to make money for private corporations, and the cycle just continues. Do you see where I'm going with this? Does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to you? Hopefully, as we go throughout this, man, it hits you and you can understand that more is expected of you. More is expected of you. Like none of you should want to be in this position, in this situation at any point in your life. But that's really not even what I want to talk about today. I said all this, I showed you all this to get to the point I want to make today, right? To get to the point I want to make today. I want to reshape that image what my man told me earlier, that he was told his ancestors were slaves. I want to change that image. I want to reshape that. I'm going to give you another way to look at it. Before I get to that, I want to ask you, because I told you I want to make it interactive. How does all of that make you feel? All of that I just showed you, all of that I just said to you, how does that make you feel? Who's willing to be brave enough to answer that question? My man over here. Thank you, sir. Man, you in my head, bro. You in my head. Because he's saying what I want to say later. Absolutely. So when you see this, it makes you feel that who you are and who your ancestors were, we've really accomplished nothing in life. That's what it makes me feel too. I agree with you. It makes me feel the same way. Can you guys agree with that? It makes you feel that as a black man in this country, because this program is for the African American Male Initiative, so I geared this toward black men. It makes you feel that we've really done nothing in life, right? Which is, you should not feel that way at all. So it's my goal to change that perception. And how do I do that? Oh, before I move on now, I don't want to make it all negative. I don't want it to seem that none of that I just talked about, no positives came out of it, because it did. You know, some positives did come out of it, but not in the sense that like my man said, you can feel a sense of accomplishment. Because even in everything that slaves did do in this country, build the roads, build the cities, build Washington, D.C., they didn't do it because they wanted to do it. They did it because they had to do it, right? So there's no sense of accomplishment. If I force you to do something, it's not going to be the same as if you do it, take the initiative to do it upon yourself, right? Exactly. So I want to change that perception. So that's my goal, to expand your knowledge, and in the process give you a different way of perceiving your history and who you are. That's my goal today, right? So instead of thinking of yourself as the descendants of slaves, think of yourself as this way. This is how I think of myself. This is what that professor at Georgia Southern taught me. He told me, you are not the descendants of slaves. He said, that is not true. If you think of yourself as the descendants of slaves, guess what? That cuts your history to about a 400-year period. That means your history is only 400 years old, and your history is thousands of years older than that. Thousands of years. So he told me to think of myself as, your ancestors were kings, queens, pharaohs, high priests, engineers, doctors, scholars, astronomers, architects, who were kidnapped, then enslaved. Do you see the difference in those two statements? Your descendants were slaves versus your descendants were all these great people who were kidnapped, then enslaved. Does that make you think of it differently when you hear it that way? Yes or no? Yeah, me too. It made me think of it differently too. I agree with you, right? It gives you a totally different way of perceiving who you are and perceiving who your ancestors were. It doesn't relegate them to just a few years of hard labor, servitude, being submissive to someone else, right? It opens up the whole spectrum of who they were and what you can be. So I can't show you a lot of images of what that looked like, how I just showed you a lot of images of what the slavery mentality looked like. But what I can show you is, like my brother over here said, I can show you some of the accomplishments of those people that can make you see that we are greater than you've been taught to believe. So where does it start? And look, I'm going to talk about specific things. It's much broader than even what I'm going to present to you today. But within a 45-minute to hour time period, there's only so much I can address. This right here is based on years of research and reading and studying, right? So I can't give it to you in 45 minutes to an hour. So if you're motivated by anything I tell you today, it's up to you to leave here and continue researching for yourself. You guys got something I didn't have even when I was in college. It's called the internet. It's called Google. You can go online, pop it in, and you can research this stuff for yourself. I didn't have that ability when I was in school, so I was reading books, right? I had to go dig through the card catalog and read books. Who knows what a card catalog is? Oh, y'all know, huh? Okay. All right. I had to dig through the card catalog. Y'all can go on Google, right? All right, so I want to show you some of the images of the accomplishments that your ancestors made that you've been taught maybe were not made by your ancestors. That's my goal, right? So I'm going to start with just architecture in itself, because that's the biggest place where you can see the contributions of your ancestors, just in architecture itself, their architectural contributions to society. So I'm going to give you something to think about. We're going to start with the pyramids. At the beginning of this PowerPoint, you saw 3 pyramids, right? Or with my title page, it said Reconstructing Perception. How many of you have ever saw those pyramids before this presentation? Have you ever seen those 3 before? Okay, a few of you guys have. So when you see those pyramids, you will believe that those are the only pyramids that stand in Africa. Because those are the same 3 you see all the time. Am I right or wrong, my man? Because you like to interact with me, so I like that. So I'm going to feed off of you. So are those the only ones you've ever seen? Those 3? Yeah, those 3 right there in the Giza, the pyramids of Giza in the Valley of the Kings. That's where those stand in Egypt. That's another misperception I need to address, but I have to save it for another conversation, because you guys have been taught. I was a history teacher, so I know this. I know the standards that are in the educational of Georgia, the Georgia standards. You're taught that Egypt is in the Middle East. Come on, man. How Egypt in the Middle East? And on every map I look at, it's in Africa. You know what I mean? Every map I've ever seen, Egypt is in Africa. So those 3 pyramids that I showed you at the beginning, you're taught, oh, that's in Egypt, so that's in the Middle East. Nah, that's in Africa, brother. But let's take it a little bit deeper than that, because those are not the only 3 that stand. This thing right here tell you, say, although the three pyramids located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt are the most popular, there are pyramids located all over Africa. There are 96 other pyramids in Egypt alone, 96 more. There are 44 in Sudan. They go as far south as South Africa and as far west as Nigeria. There are pyramids all over the continent of Africa. The one on the first PowerPoint, I'm gonna bring it up. The one in the middle, the biggest one. That's the biggest structure ever built by man. The biggest structure. It's called the Khufu's pyramid because Khufu was the pharaoh at that time, right? It's the biggest structure ever built by man. Now let me tell you something that's funny. Just last week I was reading an article on National Geographic, and in the Sudan, they have started uncovering another pyramid that they believe is even bigger than that one, just based on the tip of it that they've uncovered so far. They say this one probably is not the biggest one. This is one of the 7 wonders of the world, the biggest structure we've ever seen. Now, how do you think those guys built that? They didn't have saws or hammers. Think about that. Yeah. Now, is that not amazing to you? Is that not an accomplishment you can be proud of? That your ancestors built those pyramids by themselves all over the continent of Africa? Right? That's the back side of that picture. There are other pyramids outside those three. Those three are surrounded by little smaller pyramids, if you never knew that, right? But then you got them in the Sudan, like I told you before. You got them in Ethiopia. They all over Africa, right? There are pyramids all over Africa. That one in the left corner is the oldest pyramid ever built, the Step Pyramid. The Step Pyramid. Yeah, let me tell you the interesting thing about these two right here? Yeah, that's because I want to show you the back picture of it and a front picture of it. So that's the front of it, that's the back of it. Hey, but these pyramids, these three were built by grandfather, father, and son, 3 pharaohs. The biggest one was built by the grandfather, his son built the next one, and then his son built the smallest one, right, over a period of time. So this is one accomplishment in itself that you never was taught. The Africans built it, your ancestors, who were kidnapped and enslaved. Now think about this too, right? When Africans were kidnapped, don't think that they went and got the weakest out of the bunch. They went and got the strongest, the bravest, the smartest, the most skilled, because they needed them to perform certain jobs, right? So when they brought them here, no one was teaching them how to build roads. No one was teaching them how to build buildings. They already knew how to do it, because they were the smartest people that they could find in Africa. You understand? All right, let's move on. What else? What else can we look at? Statues and monuments that stand all over Africa that were built by Africans, the biggest structures that have been standing for over 30,000 years, thousands of years they've been standing, still stand, they were built by Africans. They're humongous. How did they build them without a crane? How did they get up there to build these statues, these monuments? I don't know. Because the interesting part about it, scientists have tried to recreate these things, these pyramids and these statues, and today in modern times, they can't even do it. So they knew something that obviously that even all the technology that's available today can't teach you, right? Is that not interesting? And then you look at this Sphinx right here in the middle. This actually stands out front of those 3 pyramids. This is in front of them. It's called a Sphinx, and it's the head of a king and the body of a lion. And it's just basically based on the African philosophy that man should let their intellect override their animal instincts, right? So all those animalistic instincts that we have naturally, that you're naturally born with, your intellect should override that. That's what this was a depiction of. That's why they built this Sphinx. Does that make sense to you? All right, I see some of you already captivated. I can see it in your eyes because you've never seen this before. I was the same way when I learned it, right? So let's move on. Castles. I bet you didn't know there were castles in Africa. Did you know there were castles in Africa? No, you don't see castles in Africa. You only see castles in Europe and in England and France, right? But there are castles all over Africa. Ones that when other people, other cultures saw them, they copied their styles. They went and did the same technology, the same design in their homeland once they started conquering Africa. These are all over Africa: Ethiopia, Cameroon, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. They're all over Africa. Now later on in life and later on in history, once slavery happens, most of these castles were turned into what they call slave castles. It's where they held slaves as they went out rounding them up, put them in these dungeons that were located in these castles, went back out, rounded up more slaves, and that's where they were kept until they put them on that boat I showed you earlier and sent them out. So a lot of them were used for negative reasons, but that's not why they were built. You understand? Let's move on. Arcs and columns. In third grade, I told you I was a teacher in this state. I know in third grade they tell you that arcs and columns were introduced to architecture by Greeks. Have you ever heard that? You remember that from third grade social studies? You've heard that, right? The Greeks introduced arcs and columns, that architectural technique, to the world. So you'll see they'll show you these, I just told you that. You will see these Greek buildings with columns and arcs, right? These are all Greek, right? So that's their contribution. Well, I can show you that thousands of years before the Greek continent, the Greek period even existed, there were already arcs and columns in Africa. And I'm going to show you who actually came up with that architectural structure at the end of this PowerPoint. I'm going to show you the genius who thought of this whole technique of arcs and columns to support the weight of buildings. So the ones up top are in Greece, and the ones at the bottom are in Africa. The ones at the bottom are older than anything. Way before the Greek civilization even came into being, these existed, right? Now, I don't want you to go back to school and tell your history teacher that she's wrong. That's not my purpose, but I just want you to kind of soak it up and understand what I'm trying to get you to see, right? Right? Because you all told me that you learned the same thing in third grade about arcs and columns. I learned the same thing, so I know, right? So let's move along. Now, this is my favorite one to share because the obelisk. Who knows what an obelisk is? Nobody? Yeah, I know. Me neither. I didn't know either. So I don't blame you. The obelisk, right? It's another architectural phenomenon mastered in the ancient African civilization of Egypt, but they stand again all over Africa. There are more obelisks in Africa than anywhere in the world. Let's skip through the reading and just get right to it. This right here, this is the Mall in Washington, right? In Washington, D.C. Who's ever seen this thing before, right? When Martin Luther King was giving his famous speech, he was standing outside of this thing right here, right? This obelisk. So you already know what I'm going to say by now, right? What I'm about to tell you. Where that came from. You already know what I'm about to tell you. Y'all catch on real quick. So this is in Africa right here, right? This is in Africa. Way before anything in Washington, D.C. was built, those existed. All over Africa. Not just in Egypt, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, on the west coast of Africa. They exist all over Africa. So even we in our capital nation borrowed something from the civilization of Africa, right? Is that not interesting to you? Does that not give you another way to perceive, like my man said earlier, the accomplishments that your ancestors have made to society, right? Mr. Drummond, what I look like on time? I'm trying to make sure I go quickly. Oh, okay, perfect. Perfect timing. Before I end, I gave you a lot of architectural and structural accomplishments to be proud of. Now I want to talk about two specific people, two specific Africans that you can be proud of, that you've never heard of in your life. I can promise you that, right? The first one is Musa the First, better known as Mansa Musa, or king or emperor, king of Mali. He was the last great king in Africa before colonialism, before Europeans came into Africa and started taking slaves. He was the last great king that reigned in Africa. So what's interesting about Mansa Musa? Other than the fact, first of all, how many of you have ever seen the movie The Lion King? I know y'all all guys, but don't be trying to act tough, because I've seen it too. I've seen The Lion King too, right? This is what I find interesting about Mansa Musa. He is the nephew of Sundiata. The movie The Lion King is really based on a real African king. Tell you something else you don't know. His name was Sundiata. There's a book about him. It's called The Epic of Sundiata. He was so courageous and so full of pride, they called him the Lion King. So they took his life story and made it into a Disney movie. This guy, Mansa Musa, is his nephew, right? So that's something you can go and look up. You should go order that book on Amazon. It's like $2. It's real thin. You can read it real quick. It's like 70 pages, The Epic of Sundiata, and you will learn about a great African king that a Disney movie is now based about. All right, so what's interesting about Mansa Musa? Why did I put him in the PowerPoint slide? Because I know how you youngsters think. So I want to give you something to think about that's not so technical and all of that good stuff. This guy right here is considered the richest man to ever live on earth. The richest man to ever live on earth, Musa the First. Not even Bill Gates got more money than this dude had, right? He had a lot of money. Back then, money was gold, so he had a lot of gold. During his lifetime, it's the only time in history that one person controlled the price of gold. He controlled the price of gold. Whatever he wanted to be worth, the value to be, he controlled that. If he wanted to be worth $20, it was worth $20. If he wanted to be worth $100, it would be worth $100. He completely controlled the gold at that time. Now, this guy has so much money, he took a trip from Mali, which is in northwest Africa, all the way across North Africa into Saudi Arabia one time. And on that trip, he gave away so much gold to the poor people and to other people he met along the way, it completely collapsed the economy of North Africa because it was too much money in circulation. You know that once there's too much money in circulation, it inflates the money, right? So that makes the economy collapse. So that's essentially what he did. He gave away so much money that it collapsed the whole economy of North Africa. Now, you may not believe me, but 2 years ago in 2012, some economists did a study because they wanted to figure out who was the richest person to ever live, right? They did a study. And in this study, they came up with a list of 25 people. Again, you can Google this. It was in many economic magazines, right? And they came up with the list of who the richest people was. And at the top of that list, this is the list right here. I just copied and pasted it from the article. You will see Mansa Musa, ruler of the Malian Empire, number 1. And they estimated him at $400 billion. $400 billion, Mansa Musa, richest man to ever live. And you can see Warren Buffett, one of the richest men to live today, he's all the way at the bottom, right? This is one of your ancestors right here. The richest person to ever live was one of your ancestors. Have you ever heard that before? You ever knew that? Hold up, say what now? You say, who'd you say? Jay-Z? Jay-Z? You think Jay-Z on this list? Stop, man. Stop, man. Stop, man. He ain't even got enough money to be in the conversation, man. What's that Chris Rock joke? If Bill Gates woke up with Oprah Winfrey money, he would jump off the roof? That's how I see Jay-Z. If Warren Buffett woke up with Jay-Z money, he would jump off the roof. He ain't got money compared to these cats, man. So I just want to prove to you, you can Google this, you can find the article. It's in several economic magazines. It was published in October of 2012, and you will see the richest man to ever live was Mansa Musa, a black and African king, right? And you probably know some of these other names on here too. Where is Bill Gates? Number 12. So that's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money. So there's one more person I want to talk to you about before I wrap this up today. It's one more African ancestor I want you to be aware of. So I've showed you the richest man to ever live was African. Hey, can you hold it for 5 minutes? Like, I want to hear it, though. Don't forget, though, okay? I'm going to come back to you in 1 second. I showed you the richest man to ever live, and he was African. Now I'm going to show you the smartest man to ever live, and he was African. And his name is Imhotep. Mahiru Imhotep. This dude right here is considered the smartest man to ever live on earth, to ever walk earth. Now again, I wish that you would go take it upon yourself to go investigate him, because I can't give you all of the information and everything that he did in life, but he did a lot of great things, right? Just to start with, he was an engineer, he was a scribe, he was an astrologer, he was a minister, he was a confidant to the king, right? That first pyramid I showed you and many of those other pyramids, that's the guy who designed them, Imhotep. He designed those pyramids. He was the architect behind those great structures. He planned them out, right? Including the first one, which is the oldest one in history. This dude wrote an encyclopedia of architecture that traveled around the world. So it makes sense that so many other cultures were able to copy what he did, because he wrote it all down in an encyclopedia. An encyclopedia of architecture, right? He was the first one to use stones to build a building. Before that time, they were using wood, right? Trees, go out into the forest, cut down some logs. He was the first person to use stone. He was the first person to introduce columns in architecture. This guy did it. Arcs in architecture. That was his idea. But it goes even deeper than that to me. This guy was also the world's first doctor. See how broad his spectrum was? He was the first doctor on record, right? So even people like Hippocrates, who you hear of, they call the father of medicine, Hippocrates. If you go and you read some of Hippocrates' literature, he would tell you, I can't take that title because this dude right here was teaching me, right? At the University of Alexandria in Africa. That's where they were going to learn this stuff. From this guy, Galileo, Socrates, they all studied at the University of Alexandria under this guy, Imhotep, right? So, again, I can't show you every little thing. That's not my goal here today. My goal here today was just to try to get you to see it differently, to know that, as my man said earlier, we've accomplished nothing, to get you to understand that's not true at all. You've accomplished many great things. And it's not, I used to be told when I was growing up, you have to do this because your ancestors died. Slaves, they died for this. And that's true to a certain extent, but I see it differently. I say that you got to do great things because your ancestors already did great things. And they expect greatness of you. Not just because someone died for it. Like, it goes deeper than that. These guys were already doing great things in life before they were brought here to do other things. It's up to you to continue that dream, to continue that tradition that they started all those thousands of years before. And we're talking thousands of years, not just 400 years ago, right? That's just some more stuff about Imhotep I've already told you, right? And by the way, if you ever heard that saying, you've ever heard somebody say, eat, drink, and be merry, Imhotep even came up with that. That man is amazing, right? He even came up with that saying, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. So what that means is live for today. Live for today, because tomorrow is not promised. So today you should be trying to accomplish all the great things you can accomplish, because tomorrow, you can't put it off to tomorrow because you're not sure tomorrow's going to come around, right? That's all he was saying. Do everything you can do today and be your best today. Be your best today. And if you're lucky enough to make it to tomorrow, your goal should always be to be better today than you were yesterday. That should be your goal every day you wake up. How can I be better today than I was yesterday? That should always be your goal. All right, so let's finish it. Hopefully I've been able to impart a little bit of history that was previously unknown to you, show you some things that you didn't know before. Hopefully, that was my goal. Before I go further, I want to take my man's question, though. I probably give it all away. I give it all away, man. I keep about one for myself. I don't need all that money. What would you do with it? That's the question. What would you do with it? Yeah, okay. At least you're thinking smart. All right, hold up, guys. I know we're getting I know how it is to be in high school. I was a teacher, man. I know about an hour is the limit, right? So I'm finishing up right now. So hopefully the information I presented to you today gives you a new way. When you leave out this door today, it gives you a new way of viewing yourself, of viewing your perspective of who you are personally. Not how other people see you, not how other people tell you you should see yourself, but how you see yourself personally. That's my goal. My goal is for you to leave out of here with your head held high, knowing that your ancestors have contributed great things to society. That's my goal, and hopefully it worked. Because whether you believe it or not, the way you perceive yourself is going to dictate everything you do in life, down from the way you dress to the type of girls you want to date. It's all based on your perspective of how you see yourself, whether you believe it or not. Right? You believe that? It's the truth. It's the truth. All right, now, of course, this was originally supposed to take place in Black History Month, right? But it got canceled, and it got pushed back, which I'm also happy about that. I was telling Ms. Cottrell earlier, I'm kind of glad it got pushed to April, because I'm tired of the perception that we can only celebrate Black history in February. So now I got an opportunity to come here and talk to you about Black history in April, so you know that Black history is every day, not just during certain periods of the month, of the year. So this was a quote I put up here when it was originally in February by Carter G. Woodson, who's the guy who came up with the idea of Black history. Originally it was Black History Week, originally. Then they expanded it to Black History Month. And it's just a quote that kind of sums up everything I was talking to you about today by Carter G. Woodson. And it says, if you can control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. That's enough right there. I ain't got to say no more, right? If you can control the way a man think, you don't have to worry about what that man's going to do at all. I agree with that 100%. If you can determine what a man thinks, you do not have to worry about what he would do. So if I can determine the way you think, just like before you came here today, you thought of yourself as the ancestors of slaves, right? If I can determine that on my own, I don't have to worry about anything else. The damage is already done, right? If you can make a man believe that he is inferior, you don't have to compel him to seek an inferior status. He would do so without being told. Man, that's powerful. That's powerful to me. If I can make you think you're inferior, that's all it takes. You're going to do the rest on your own. You're going to believe you're inferior, and you're going to act in inferior ways. You're going to do inferior things. You're going to be out here smoking weed with your homeboys. You know what I mean? You're going to be out here committing petty crimes, stealing, doing nonsense, wasting your time, wasting your talents, wasting the talents that you have, you know? So yeah, man, I don't even have to read no more, because really the first 3 lines is all you really need to hear. You can hear the rest for yourself, right? And that's about it. Oh, I always like to end with some literature, man. I know you guys are young, right? But I like to provide some literature to help kind of continue guiding you along the way of learning this new way of thinking. And the first person I always like to tell young people to read is a guy by the name of Dr. Naeem Akbar. And the reason I always start with him is because his literature is specifically about what I just talked to you about today, shaping your perception. Because if you're not able to receive certain knowledge, it's not going to do you any good anyway. So he's going to shape you, enable you to receive the knowledge in a certain way. Dr. Naeem Akbar, great guy. I had the opportunity to meet him on a couple of occasions in Atlanta. He speaks quite often in Atlanta. And he's a great guy, amazing guy, doctor of psychology. You should read these 3 books, man. If you ever have a chance to pick them up, you should go and check them out. They're real short. I won't give you anything over 80, 90 pages because you won't read it. All of these books are about 70, 75 pages. Breaking the chains of psychological slavery, Know Thyself, and Visions for Black Men. I've read all 3 of those books, and they all 3 made an impact on my life, right? But once you get through that point, and you get to a point where you're intellectually able to receive something a little bit deeper, you can move on to some of these authors right here, and you'll learn a lot more about what I was teaching you today, about the history of your culture, the history of your ancestors. Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, who likes to be known as Dr. Ben, Dr. Chancellor Williams, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, they've all have written about the great accomplishments and the contributions of your African ancestors to society. All of these books will give you even more information than what I gave you today. All right, so I hope I was able to impart some wisdom on you guys. I hope you don't feel like it was a waste of your time. Do you have any questions for me before I walk off the stage and turn it back over to Mr. Drummer? No questions? Did you guys learn anything? So how are you going to utilize the knowledge? That's the question. How are you going to utilize the knowledge? That's important. That's definitely important. I agree with that 100%. You got to spread it on. So when you get back to school and the people who are not here, you can tell them this. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. What else? My man. Absolutely. I like that. To go places you've never been, you got to go places, do things you've never done. Yes, sir. What motivated me, man? In addition to me picking up this knowledge along the way and knowing that, like I said earlier, man, that we owe it to ourselves. We don't owe it to anyone else. I can easily stand here because my dad is in the audience and say, oh, my dad, I owed it to my parents. But really, we owe it to ourselves, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, you owe it to yourself to know that you can be something and to do everything that you can do to make it happen. You know what I mean? And I know it sounds cliche when you hear people say to you, oh, you can be anything you want to be, man. It sounds just like a cliche line that people use, but it's true, man. You can do whatever you want to do. You can walk out here today and say, I want to be whatever it is you want to be, and you can do it if you focus, right? And the main thing about that is discipline, man. It takes discipline. And I don't mean discipline in the sense of getting a whipping, right? Not that type of discipline. I'm talking about the discipline to stay focused on your goal despite everything that's going on around you, despite what all your friends are doing. despite what's going on in your neighborhood, whatever type of life you may have, the discipline to stay focused on that goal and to know, despite all of this, I can achieve whatever I want to achieve, right? So I guess the simple answer to your question, man, is just I just felt like I owed more to myself. You know what I'm saying? It was up to me. I wanted better for my own life. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? Yeah, and that's how you got to look at it, man. That's how you got to approach it every day. You got to want better for your own life, man. And if you want better, you'll do better, just like my man was basically saying a minute ago. Anybody else? Nobody else? Hey, I appreciate you guys' time. I appreciate your attention. Thank you for coming out. Y'all have a good one. Mr. Drummer.
Gentlemen, I have one question to ask you. Who are your ancestors? And kings. So it's not only slaves, right? We've learned today that we came from kings, architects, engineers, doctors. So he also said that analogy about the elephant, at the strongest mammal on land, it had you in bondage. The way that mammal was in bondage, because it started when they was a child. From when you were a child, you thought your ancestors were slaves, so your knowledge base would not extend as far as the end of this podium here. But once you perceive that your ancestors are more than slaves, they're more than people who are chained. Once you realize that there are many things that you can do and there's no limit on your life, that's what he was saying the whole time. Your perception is how you think of who you are. I want you all to give Mr. Foreman one more hand because he dropped a lot of knowledge on us today. This man said that he wants to be a lawyer because he wants to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. If y'all were ever in a bind, would you want someone like this to speak for you? Do you see how in-depth he went in with material to come in and present to you today so that you can actually challenge your own mind? This is someone that you would like to speak on your behalf. And also, the way he challenged his mind, he challenges you to challenge your own mind. So that concludes our program for today. I think East Georgia, Swainsboro High. You all have your swipe cards to sign in. You all supposed to meet with Coach Jordan? East Georgia students. Okay, East Georgia students, if you have your swipe cards for student success, meet with Coach Jordan. Swainsboro, we thank you all for coming out. The community, we thank you for coming out. East Georgia State College, we thank you for coming out. AAMI is for you, African American Male Initiative. We are for you, and we thank you all. Have a great day.